All right, welcome back. This is still Journalist Hangouts. Now, joining us via Zoom for more insight on this issue is a lawyer and advocate for good governance, justice, and equity, Liborous Oshoma. Thank you for joining us, Liborous. Good evening.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Good evening.
All right.
And good evening to Titoju and the other guests that I didn't get to say name, but I think I know the voice.
Good evening. All right, tell us, what does the Electoral Act say about issue of exclusion and disqualification of aspirants by political parties?
Yeah, I think you're talking about section 84(3) of the Electoral Act. The essence, let me quickly read that section. It says a political party shall not impose nomination, qualification, or disqualification criteria, measure, or conditions on any aspirant or candidate for any election in its constitution, guideline, or rules for nomination of candidate for election, except as prescribed under section 65, 66, 106, 107, 131, 137, 177, and 187 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. I think what that section is actually trying to cure is a situation where the Electoral Act, create the constitution of the party create guidelines that are not part of the guidelines prescribed in the Constitution. And we all know that the guideline prescribed in the Constitution is that, one, you must have reached the age of qualification. You also must have the necessary credentials, in this case, for governorship, president, and deputy governor and vice president, school sat, or its equivalent. You must not be a bankrupt, you must not be an ex-convict, and all of those criteria. So the Electoral Act is simply saying that the guideline of the political party or its constitution for qualification or disqualification must not conflict with the provisions of the provisions laid down for qualification or disqualification by the Constitution. And so, we all know, any guideline that is laid down in the rules of the party or in the constitution of the party that is contrary to the rules already laid down by the Constitution, to the extent of its inconsistency, is therefore null and void. It's only here that when issues like that happen, we now begin to go to court to litigate matters that are already clear. Your guidelines for qualification for election must be the guideline already laid down in the Constitution. That's what that section is basically saying.
Okay. Where a party duly constitutes an appeals committee or an appeals panel, and the appeal panel says cleared to contest, does the National Working Committee of the party have the power, without stating its own reasons for disqualifying the candidate, then proceed to disqualify?
The first and foremost, the guidelines of the political party for qualification or disqualification must be so clear as laid down in the Constitution. What it means is that, first and foremost, it is the guideline that is in the Constitution that guides qualification or disqualification. Any other guideline or rules and regulation imposed by the party, it's null and void. It's a nullity. Then secondly, the essence of an appeal committee is to look at the irregularities that had been taken in the process of screening candidates for election, verification. And a screening committee really is to verify credentials that had been, essence of a screening committee is to verify credentials that had been presented by candidates. And if the candidate feels that justice had not been done in the process of screening, he has a right by the party rules to appeal to an appeal committee. The appeal committee, once the appeal committee gives a decision, it is not in the body of the National Working Committee now to begin to sit on appeal over the decision of the appeal committee. So once an appeal committee gives a decision, on screening of candidates, that decision is final. If there would be any review on such, it is not in the National Working Committee to so do. And once they do that, and the matter gets to court, automatically, I know the court is going to void such decision. And even if, assuming without conceding that that is the position, it is you cannot disqualify a candidate without stating the reasons for disqualification, yes, which must be contained in the provisions laid down or in the Constitution and as prescribed by Section 84(3) of the Electoral Act. So you don't just say because I don't like, otherwise you can just wake up and say, I don't like the face of Babajide Otitoju, so he's hereby disqualified. And that was what cost the APC the election in Edo State. If you remember, the APC, because of the problem, the internal problem of between the sitting governor and the national chairman, then national chairman of the party, they created stumbling block to ensure that the candidate, is not screened or qualified from standing for election, despite having screened him in his first term on the basis of these same credentials. And when the matter eventually, though, went to court, but he had left the party, the court said that the party didn't have, such powers to so do. Even the matter of certificate forgery and the rest went to court. And the Supreme Court came down heavily, on the applicant. So in the same vein, the National Working Committee does not have the power to so do once the screening committee has cleared a candidate. It is not within the powers of the National Working Committee to sit down in their office and begin to sit on appeal over decisions taken by the appeal committee.
Why do our politicians behave in this manner? I have my reasons, but I don't know whether my reasons are your own reasons. Why do you know what the law says? It's not as if you have the judiciary in your pocket and you risk bringing down the roof by recklessly going against your own electoral guidelines and even the Electoral Act and the Constitution. Why do they behave in this manner?
Yeah, that's we all know why they behave that way, because two reasons. We have been so weaponized by the politicians with poverty that we see politics. Everybody now see politics as a way out of this poverty, and as a way to becoming relevant. And that is why our governors become emperor, our political office holders who are supposed to be serving us, we end up serving them. And so when that happens, and then there's psychophancy, there's so much psychophancy because of hunger. So the politicians, assume a larger than life image. And what they do, they circumvent the law and tell you to go to court, knowing fully well also that the windmill of justice grind here slowly, but we say surely. But we forget that justice delayed is justice denied, which was the reason for the amendments to the Constitution and the Electoral Act to abridge the time for electoral matters. That is why even if you get to the Supreme Court today, most of the cases that you have at the Supreme Court are pre-election matters. Immediately after the primaries, INEC issued a press release that they were defending about 335 cases because of so many irregularities, orchestrated by the politicians. So one would have expected that in some of these cases, the rules are clear. And then lastly, because there are no penalties, in cases where even the law comes down heavily, the court comes down heavily, like the case of Anambra that you cited, when the court, did instruct that political parties should refund money. How many of these laws, these judgments are obeyed? They are obeyed in default. And so you find out that the judgments are hardly executed. The court cannot on their own go all out to begin to execute orders that are made. You still have the executive people in the executive who are part of the system, who are part of the impunity, being those that will execute court judgment. So that is why you find in some cases, a governor will tell you, we are still studying the judgment. In some cases, they tell you, well, we will obey the judgment, as if it's in their mouth to say they will not obey. So that's the unfortunate situation we find ourselves. The police is not independent, that is supposed to execute some of these judgments. Even the Attorney General, in some cases, that should be executing some of these judgments, also is an arm and a leg of the government in some cases. So you see everybody look the other way. That's why, and when in the absence of the power of an independent power to execute court judgment, it becomes impunity reigns supreme. That's why in most cases, as I tell you, some political parties are not going to feed candidates in this forthcoming election because of some of these crises that we see play out. Where look at Akwa Ibom, look at Adamawa, look at Delta State, look at Borno State. The impunity is just everywhere. It is part of this impunity that makes us consistently amend our Electoral Act to begin to make laws on issues that ordinarily should be left to discussion.
All right, Mr. Liborous, I would like to ask you before we let you go, what is your message to all political parties concerning exclusion and disqualification of aspirants?
Yeah, my message to them is the fact that the rules have been laid down. The only way we can be respected among Community of Nations, and when we go out, people will see us truly as practicing democracy, is to play by the rules. Today, you are on the table. Tomorrow, you can be outside of the door. And this same impunity, this same precedent that you set today in disobedience to the rule would then certainly be used against you. So let's not create a do-or-die situation where Nigerians are not known to observe the rules. Simple cases, let's not end up going to court over matters that are clear. And that's why you see, just like Eleke debate, INEC keep innovating to say, okay, we want to innovate a technology that will ensure that you cannot circumvent the process. Until we get to that level also, and if the politicians do not change, then it will become unfortunate and will just become a laughingstock in the Committee of Nations. And then some of them, their actions and inaction might cost their political party, the ticket. And I also want to appeal to Nigerians that we should no longer sentimentally follow politicians, but consistently ask about antecedents, what they have done and what they can do.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Liborous Oshoma, for sharing your time with us on this particular discussion. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Mr. Liborous Oshoma is a lawyer and advocate for good governance, justice, and equity. Thank you very much.